Time has come. Yep. Okay. And we want to make this a quick meeting.
We do.
So first of all, welcome to all of you, and also a special welcome to Alana Hiha, now being an official member to our joint committee.
Thank you.
And it's great to have you here, and we look forward to your input. It'll be really great. Okay, first of all, I'll go through health and safety notices. In an earthquake, drop, cover and hold. If the shaking is long and strong, what we'll do is actually we'll go to Vautier Street and the corner of Dalton, and we'll assemble. Just follow me. I know roughly where it is, but I've got long legs, so you need to get rapid tempo on. Evacuation. If the emergency alarm sounds, immediately evacuate the building through the nearest exit and proceed to the assembly area, which is the same area that I've indicated. The council chamber is currently designated as a public place, and council policy is that anywhere in the building you need to have a face covering, and we have a 1.5 metre distancing and no more than 25. But because we've got so many people on the screen, we haven't reached the 25, so that's all good. Okay, please, Alana, can I ask you to open with karakia?
Ai. Tēnā tātou katoa, ka inoi tātou. He honere, he kororia, he maunga rongo ki te whenua, me ngā whakaaro pai ki ngā tangata katoa. E ihoa, manakitia mai mātou i te ao, i te pō, i runga o mātou, o tātou kōrero, whakarongo, me ngā whakaaro i ngā wā katoa. Āmene.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
So we've got no notices, understand?
Oh, we have apologies, but I see Tanya Hopkins is actually on the screen there.
Okay, good. So apologies. Tanya was apology for lateness, but she's made it. So obviously she's speeding. Hopefully she hasn't received any speeding tickets. Malcolm Dixon and Simon Bandel, who we actually give best wishes to, and maybe go around for a bunch of flowers or a bunch of grapes because he's got the dreaded loogies, with another 4 in his household.
Oh.
So, and apparently he's got it pretty bad. So he won't be here either. And we have people on the Zoom joining us. So that's Nigel Simpson, Tanya Kerr, Tanya Hopmans and Hayley Brown. Have I got? And then there's a whole lot of staff that are off the tag team that are there as well. And we've got Rebecca Ashcroft as well, who will be presenting from via Zoom, I understand, when she gives her update. Conflict of interest declaration. If there are none, then we'll move on. Our item number 3, confirmation of minutes of the Clifton to Tangoio Coastal Hazard Strategy Joint Committee held on the 22nd of February. Hopefully everybody has studied that in great detail. And have I got a mover to accept these as a true record? Anne, thank you.
Yeah.
Lana, thank you.
Kia ora.
All in favour to accept these minutes, say aye.
Ai.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Then we'll go to item number 4, which is actions from the previous joint committee meeting. And Chris, no doubt you will take that.
Yep, so we'll just whiz through those. So obviously on the coastal ecology work stream, you'll see in, I think, the project manager's report, we're working up the next stages of that coastal ecology work stream. So that's in progress. We distributed the presentation from the last meeting out in the pack, so that's done. The managed retreat is the subject of a workshop after this meeting, and the engagement with RMA reform continues. So that's just really just an ongoing activity, and we'll bring any key messages as appropriate.
Okay, excellent. Any questions for Chris? If there are none, shall we accept this report?
Yes.
Yes.
So I've got Hinawai and Rick. Hinawai was the mover, Rick was the seconder. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, carried. Then we go to minor item, call for minor items not on the agenda. If there are any, there are none. Then we move on. to item number 6, and that's the Clifton to Tangoio Coastal Hazard Strategy Joint Committee signals, triggers and thresholds. Chris.
Yes, so look, I'll talk to that. So look, a couple of key points. This is really just an update paper of where we're at in that work stream. Obviously, the triggers is what helps us go from one solution to another. So in the example of Clifton, the short term is status quo, the medium term is a seawall. So it's understanding what are the conditions to help us make a decision to go from one solution to the next. So that's what the triggers are. So what we've found is there's very little material or guidance as to how you actually undertake this work. So we are sort of forging our own path in terms of triggers for coastal hazards. And in item 14 there, you can see we've held a number of workshops with both the community and staff. So we're working through the process. At the end of the day, the triggers need to be really specific so they can actually be acted on at the time. So it's important that we technically get them quite correct and practical and usable. So really the next steps, once we nut through some of that detail, is to bring a bit of a report back and also socialise the proposed thresholds with the wider community. So that's pretty much where we're at now. So I'm happy to answer any questions, although with Simon being the key project resource for this activity, we may have to get back if there's any more challenging questions.
Thank you, Chris. And definitely this is quite exciting work. It's actually practical. You actually can see, and while we're having discussions with the community, what their thoughts are and their aspirations, which is actually very important for us to engage with. And those discussions really open up what some of the possibilities are. And it's great to have that input, and hopefully we'll continue to be in front of community to get this work completed in due time. Are there any questions? Yes.
Kia ora, Chair, and thank you, Alana, tēnā koe mō te karakia. Thank you for opening us, and just a mihi to Christine Hilton. I see you're on the screen as well for Heretaunga Tamatea Settlement. Kia ora. Just a question of in this item, I see on figure 1, we've got our signals.
Yep.
So under cultural indicators and environmental indicators, is this the stage to start looking at cultural impact assessments or environmental impact assessments, or at what stage do we start to get more detailed around the solutions for each cell?
Yep. So I think it's more than a CIA. It's actually understanding for each cell, are there areas of cultural significance, exactly what are they, and then that's part of the creation of the triggers. So I think there's, as we say, there's still more work to do, but that's for every cell. We need to effectively create what are the conditions that would help us make a decision to go from one response to another, and they're all the criteria there. So the work that I've seen, there's a huge myriad of both signals and triggers, and we'll bring some of that detail to you in future briefings. And there may be some gaps we need to look at a little bit harder, but I think it's more than just a global CIA. It's actually this is the area. This is why it's important. This is why we want it protected. And we do that on a cell-by-cell basis. So I think a bit of further engagement on that will occur.
That'd be great. Thank you.
And this figure 1 is actually a graphic of one particular cell, so we can actually adopt that on each cell, and that's where we'll find that out. And no doubt there are gaps because we really haven't looked at this space before. So this is new territory for all of us, really. Alana.
Aye, through the chair, thank you. So when I look at figure 1, are there ways of these different indicators being offset against each other? So, for example, when we think of cultural indicators and social indicators in that particular example, public access may challenge some of the cultural sites that are identified.
Yep.
And how do we make sure that our conversation with the community is inclusive, so that we don't shut off one to spite the other?
Yeah. So, look, I'd say it's not easy. The key with those signals is it's about finding the most critical
Yeah.
signal.
Yes.
And so it's not necessarily there needs to be a signal in each category, but we work through that as a mechanism to find what is the critical signal, what is the most important element to the community, and sometimes there will be trade-offs, and that's part of the discussion with the community. So, look, a lot of that work is still to occur in terms of that consultation of what we think the signals and triggers may look like in terms of reporting back to community. And just like to stress as well, there's no real guidance on how you go about this, so we are sort of finding our way. So it is certainly new territory, but look, there will definitely be trade-offs as to, for the community, what are the priorities, and we need to work through that, and particularly around the triggers. Most sensibly, it's actually something consistent that can be measured, that can be acted on. Otherwise, you end up with triggers that are then debated at the time or challenged, and so it's quite important. They're very clear and concise.
Thank you.
It's a good question, and since I've been chair of this committee, and I got interested in it because just listening to how the draft strategy was developed in conjunction with the community, and I think I don't want to tread on any other work that the Hawke's Regional Council or the other councils have undertaken, but this is one of the best strategies that I have seen, or processes that we have followed, that we actually have been donkey deep with the community. They were involved. There was Kai always available during that time of discussions. There were just some really good vibe, and we really got to know each other. And we walked in each other's moccasins for at least 400 meters, if it was 400 k's, and that was really important, because that's how you build trust with each other, and that's what this strategy definitely has done. We definitely, and Rebecca can report on that, is we definitely a mix of community is not quite right, and we need to work on that, and we need to get a bit smarter on that in time to come. But as we get more to the actual work, or closer to the finalisation of the draft, hopefully we'll get other interested parties to come along as well, and come with us on that journey.
Thank you.
Anne.
Thank you, Chair. We're talking about priorities, and some of them are a little complicated. Just looking at economic indicators and insurance withdrawn, there are already a number of properties who have had insurance withdrawn. So how would we prioritise between, I guess, commercial, private, what the importance is? Is it just to an individual's pocket, or is it to the community's pocket? I think there's some complications in the priority list.
Look, absolutely, and I think you've hit the nail on the head there, particularly around scale. These issues need to be worked through. I think withdrawal of insurance is a very clear and factual activity. It's hard to debate, but yes, what if it's one of 10 properties? And I think that's some of the work that needs to be done to go ahead. What is the threshold? Is it one property? Is it more than half the properties? What about people who elect not to take out insurance? For example, they don't see the need.
And the other interesting thing to note there is some of the
Is
properties...
this a subsequent question or
Subsequent
comment?
question, sorry, Chair. Comment.
That's okay.
Question. Yeah, it's a comment. And it's about the fact that some of the insurance has been withdrawn, and then another insurance company has picked it up and gone with it. So there's another anomaly there that needs to be sort of investigated, I think, just to make sure that that's a good grounding to put in there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it is. Thank you.
Well, the other comment I can make to that, we need to make sure that this draft strategy becomes an adopted strategy, and that we'll continue to work within the policy framework to get to those outcomes that are required. Even though we may hear of some instances where, for instance, a so-called trigger that we think may be in place in due time is reached, we cannot move any faster, and that's just, we're working within policy and within council as well. Okay. Are there any questions maybe from the wall? Yes. Tanya.
Tanya.
Tangoio.
Atamarie, everyone. Beautiful day out there. I just have some questions with regard to the RMA framework that's being worked up by central government at the moment, and just seeking assurance that as we build this framework, we're really cognizant of what's coming at us. And then a subsequent question to that is, everything other than status quo going to require a consent like it currently does?
So I guess a few comments on that is, if you'll recall, I can't remember the exact joint committee meeting, we did have a discussion about whether we wait for clear guidance from government or continue on our path, and there was a very strong direction to the team to continue on our path, so that's what we are doing. With regards to what's happening in terms of RMA policy, we have a part of our tag, professional planners keeping tabs on what's happening, and there's currently some information out for consultation, I think, from MFE, and we're yet to digest exactly what that is. But we are looking at that environment. There's no guarantees that what we are doing now will align with future acts that come into place or 1 or 2 years' time, but I think we're very well placed to respond to any changes. So I think we've got the right balance, that we're continuing to forge ahead. We're monitoring the environment, which may influence our response, but at the moment we have no tangible knowledge to work on, except knowing that we have a highly changing environment that we're entering into. And I think it's fair to assume that any amendment or any change to that natural environment will require a consent. And I probably can't see a future where there's simply no consent. It might be the burden that changes, but I think we will always need to apply for a consent if we're building in that coastal zone or placing material in that coastal zone. And I think that's probably right, that we understand the impact to the environment, and it's important that I think we do the upfront work to make that as seamless as possible, and we go in informed with the right knowledge to those processes.
Subsequent question or comment?
Thank you, Chris. Really appreciate and agree with everything you've said. Thank you.
Great, good. If there are no other questions, then I will, if I can have a mover for the recommendation, which is that the Clifton to Tangoio Coastal Hazard Strategy Joint Committee receives and considers the signals, triggers and thresholds update staff report. Anne and Henawai, thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, then we go to our next item, item 7.
So that's the Memorandum of Transition.
MOT, yes.
MOT. So, look, this is a fantastic, I think, celebration for this joint committee. This paper is very much for the record to outline exactly what the decision was at each council. But we did have the session with the Central Hawke's Bay District Council earlier this week, and they agreed with no major objections to the proposal. So that means every council has now agreed with the direction of travel, which is fantastic, and I think will really allow the strategy to go forward, and it has really unlocked that major issue we had around the clarity on responsibility going forward. So I think it's a fantastic achievement for the Joint Committee and the team, and a real cause, I think, to celebrate.
Exactly, very, very much so. Any comments or questions?
I just expect the chair to break out the fridge and pour the champagne to celebrate.
Well, unfortunately, the chair of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council hasn't given me the key to the fridge, so I can't. But otherwise, I would. but it's really great. Hinawai.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, and just really supportive of what you've said, Chris, around the mahi that you've done to get us to this stage. There have been concerns, particularly from the Regional Council, around taking on this new role and being a leader in this space for the draft strategy. So thank you very much to you and the TAG team for doing that. And again, just supportive of our councillors at the Regional Council who have accepted this, along with the other councils. So it's an exciting space, a new space for us to move into. And really looking forward to the journey onwards. So thank you.
Okay, I've got two hands up that I can see. Nigel.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Chris, thank you very much for your update. It does provide for us a very good signal of where the strategy's future rests and the progress that can be made. However, in the Memorandum of Transfer, I just want to question paragraph 7.2, there's a slight change in there, which has been agreed, I understand, at the chief executives who we've delegated authority to, but it does say there is subject to suitable terms being developed. So I was just wondering if you could explain to me where those terms sit, because I don't think they've been documented yet.
Yep.
Where are they programmed to be developed, and when will we have visibility of those terms?
Yeah. So look, that's a good question. So this memorandum of transition is high level, and it's really a commitment of the parties. What that essentially says is there will be a further document developed between the relevant organisations known as the Coastal Hazard Asset Transfer Agreement, and that's when those suitable terms will be struck. And for example, an example of what might be sought in those terms is an undertaking from the organisation handing over the asset, that they're confirming that that asset was built and consented to the appropriate standards, has been maintained to a good standard and is in good order prior to the handover. So that might be an example of what goes in there. I think it will be highly detailed because it is the transfer of millions of dollars worth of assets, and we just need to get that detail right. But there is a time frame in which we want to put that agreement together by about this time in 2023, so we're well prepared for the actual transfer that will occur in 2024. So we've got plenty of time to have a look and work through what those specific conditions are.
Correct, especially with the Napier assets, we really have a really close look, Nigel. I had another.
I'm sure you will. One's missing at the moment.
May remain missing in action. I thought, Tanya Kerr, you had your hand up, or you lowered it?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hallie Brown.
Mute too.
You're on mute.
I am. There we go. Hi. Just because this is a public forum, I was just wondering, are we being live streamed, actually? That's one of my questions.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. I was just wondering, the Whakaruri Ave revetment, I see that is being crossed out, and I was just wondering if we could get just a quick update for the public around why that's been crossed off.
Yeah, so I'm happy to respond to that. So the Memorandum of Transition talks about existing assets, because we can only transfer assets that we know exist. And so that's why that particular asset was struck out, because it does not yet exist. Now there is provisions in this agreement where decisions are made by either Napier City Council or the Hastings District Council to create new coastal infrastructure in the intervening period between now and July 2024, that there's a consultation process with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and there's other decision rights in there as well. So the reason it's not there is it doesn't exist, and there's a mechanism to consult and work out any details in that period between now and July 2024.
Okay. Before I go to you, Tanya, Christine Hilton, there's a little bit of yellow wallpaper in the corner where normally the yellow hand goes up. So I'm not quite sure whether your hand is up or not. Maybe I should have gone to Specsavers.
Kaori, my hand isn't up. Apologies for that.
Okay, excellent. Just use your actual hand if you want to speak. Councillor Tanya Kerr.
Thank you.
That previous question actually leads into what I was going to ask and then decided not to. But it's around, do we see this agreement, the formal and final agreement, preventing a council from creating an infrastructure in the coastal environment in the future? I can't see why a city council or district council would want to, but I'm just really interested in the scope of the agreement and if it is possible to actually prevent that happening, be it a good thing or a not good thing.
Rick.
To answer that, I don't think it absolutely prescribes councils from acting in that way, but if a council were to do so, it would threaten the very existence of the agreement, because the agreement is that how the coast is managed is transferred to be handled by one entity in consultation with all others. So it's a consultative process. So if a council was to go and act unilaterally of its own motion without direction of consultation and start erecting structures, well then the agreement we've got is, in my view, dead in the water. So I guess this is an agreement that rests on goodwill, trust and honest dealings as much as anything else.
Good, excellent. Subsequent question or comment?
If I may, through you, Chair of this committee, to comment to the Chair of the Regional Council, I completely support what you say, completely. And I just would like assurance from the team as they go through formalising the agreements to make sure that the agreement is quite black and white in this space and that it removes any grey area. Thank you.
It is a good point, and maybe, if I may be so cheeky to say that maybe Hastings District Council actually has helped us in a way to actually expose a loophole that possibly could be in the agreement. So we'll look into this further, and I see Chris is definitely making notes. Hinawai.
Yeah, just to add on to that. Add on to that, please, Chair. Would it be sensible that if there was a want by the other councils to actually bring it back to the Joint Coastal Committee anyway? I mean, that's one reason why we are forming the advisory committee.
Yeah, sure.
So that's a very logical pathway for any such requests of other councils to bring it back to the right body, which is this committee.
Yeah. Very good point, and I think that's part why Rainer Asher advised us to formulate an advisory committee. So we have that open discussion forum where we can seek advice, and advice can be given and offered up. So it's really good.
Very good.
Overall, I must admit, this is actually a very good piece of policy that we actually come together with. And I already have seen in other areas where we actually work together as councils that this is actually a very good example of where we could go to with some of our other issues that we're dealing with. And that's climate change is one, transportation is one. There's a few others that we actually could apply this type of thinking to. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions?
Just respond to Tanya's point again. The thing too here, I think there's some pretty good safeguards in that for any such activity to be undertaken, it would need a resource consent, which would have to come to both councils and couldn't deal with it singly. It was the councils to act unilaterally. So if there was to be a structure placed somewhere for example, let's use Hastings as a for example, by Hastings, well then there would need to be a resource consent which would have to pass through the regional council. Secondly, there would be a requirement for there to be consultation. And I'm sure the public would raise a whole pile of questions about a council doing something different to all the rest of it. And the third point is it would lead us back, if that was to be the case, it would lead us back to where we were in the past. And it's a very good example of where we were in the past and the present. and that is in Westport. I've been recently in Westport, and locals there are dismayed at the fact that they've got a standoff between the views of the Regional Council and the views of the Bullitt District Council. So both have different reasons, and when I've explained to them what we were doing here in Hawke's Bay, they said, "Oh, couldn't we have that too? You've done that?" They were really impressed. So, they're in the position where they can't get certainty. Both councils have got different views, and their communities are under threat. So no one wants to be there. We have taken ourselves to a different space, and I just think it would be an almost irrational act to go and put us back into that space again. So I think that I agree with you. It's a concern, but we should just. I'm not sure how you could absolutely prevent it, but I think we've got some pretty good safeguards.
Thank you, Rick.
Thank you. Okay, if there are no other questions, not that I want to stifle the discussion on this, because it's a very important document, but if there's no other questions or comments, then I would like to move the recommendation that the Clifton to Tangoio Coastal Hazard Strategy Joint Committee receives and notes the Memorandum of Transition and the Council Decisions Staff Report. Have I got a mover? Anne is putting her hand up. And Rick, those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you. Carried. Thank you very much for that, and great work, Chris, Simon and the team.
Thank you.
And we'll move to project manager's update. And since the project manager is laying flat on his back, feeling sorry for himself, he's got man COVID, no doubt, his wife will say, I'll ask you, Chris, to do the project manager's update.
Absolutely. So look, we have a paper there with a high-level summary of where the project is at. A couple of key things. Obviously, the managed retreat we have a workshop to go through that draft report in a bit of detail shortly, and also noting that now that we have agreement on the MOT, the Hawke's Bay Regional Council will commence their Section 16 process, and that's outlined with some key dates there into the next LTP, and also highlighting, following the initial environmental work stream that was presented at the last meeting, we are proposing the creation of a Mātauranga Māori work stream to tie into that, and we are just working on how that might look. So in particular, asking for anyone who is interested in helping scope that up to contact Simon, and then we'll bring that back at a subsequent meeting. So they're, I think, the highlights of the report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Henoi.
Chair, thanks for that update, Chris. Just with your Mātauranga Māori work stream, have you canvassed those mana whenua who have been involved in the past? I think there was a group initially, and I don't know how active they are again, but maybe re-engaging that group sort of first and foremost to get advice.
Yep, so good idea. Look, I haven't been involved in the details, so I'll need to talk to Simon, and we can just get back of exactly where that's at, and look, if there's any direction or help, fantastic.
Great, excellent. Yeah, that's a good point, and I think we need to really get active in that particular space. There's no two ways about it. Any other comments or questions? If there's not, then I would like to move the recommendation, or get somebody to move the recommendation that the Clifton Tangoio Coastal Hazard Strategy Joint Committee receives and notes the project manager's update staff report that was given, just written now by Chris. Alana and Rick, all those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Carried.
Can we send the project manager our best wishes for a full and speedy recovery?
We shall do that. I'll get Monique to draft an email, a letter. I'm not sure whether they've got budget in the budget a gift card or anything like that.
He'll probably be watching, so we can tell him direct. Yep.
Simon, if you're there, get well soon. We need you. Okay, then we go to item number 9, which is communication engagement update, and we have Rebecca online on Zoom. And Rebecca, the floor is yours.
Yep. So Rebecca's got a bit of a presentation to give us. So need to set that up. Are you going to share your screen, Rebecca, or do we need to do something at this end?
Morena koutou, I'll share my screen from this end.
Okay, can we make the screen big?
So I'll take the paper as read and just walk you through the presentation with some results from the community survey. Feel free to interrupt me or ask questions at the end. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Just put the lighting down.
Brilliant. Okay. So I talked through this at the last joint committee, but the idea of this survey came about because we wanted to do some pre-engagement ahead of consultation with the community. And the idea was to get people talking about the strategy and to hear about their values and connections and concerns with the coast, as well as to get a feel for the question we'll be asking during consultation. So the survey was shared digitally through our newsletter, through social media channels, and on our website, as well as some posters going up around coastal cafes. And we had it open for 3 weeks in March. And I was hoping to get around 50 survey responses, and we got 81, which I think is really good. So I was really happy with that. And we wanted to know at the very offset where people lived, because this would of course influence the way that they responded. So 49 people lived either on the coast or within 1 or 2 blocks from the coast, and 19 lived further than 5 kilometres away from the coast. And we asked people to describe the way that they felt about the coast. So that was to get an understanding of the connection people have to the coast, both positive and negative, as you can see. So some beautiful, but also vulnerable or fragile. So it was really nice to get those words, and those are just some key words. There were a lot more. I was just picking out the top ones. We asked how concerned people were about coastal hazards, and from this graph we can see that people are in the majority concerned with extremely, very and fairly concerned, all having strong responses there. And people saw the biggest coastal issues being climate change and rising sea levels, erosion, human intervention, lack of action. So in people's longer answers, that was talking about councils taking or the strategy taking longer than they'd hoped for action to take place. And there were also a few comments about west shore erosion and the renourishment that happens there yearly. We asked if the respondents had either personally or known someone who'd experienced loss or damage through coastal hazards, and 22 had, which was quite high. So the key types of damage was flooding, loss of insurance, loss of land or property damage. We asked 10 questions around what the strategy is going to be doing in the next 10 in the future, and what's important. I'm only pulling together 4 here because otherwise it would take a really long time to go through. But so the first one was let nature take its course. So this was quite an interesting one. It's fairly spread around whether people want nature to take its course or whether we need intervention. And then looking at the next question, we asked about best possible protection. We can see how strongly the response was, with very important coming up with over 40 responses. And then to tie in with that, we asked about if people would prefer lowest cost or lowest impact on rates options. And as you can see, that links into the last question about best possible protection, because there are a lot of people in the middle or who think it's totally unimportant or somewhat unimportant that it's the lowest cost that we go for. And then another question we asked was around culture and heritage and wahitapu and mahinga kai sites. And as we can see, this is really, really important for the community. We asked what the community wanted to see more and less of at the coast. And interestingly, you'll see that in both more of and less of, there's hard engineering solutions. So it shows that there is a mix in the community around how we should be managing coastal hazards. This question is what we'll be coming back to in the consultation. So it was really to get a good gauge of what the support was in the community, or lack of, for the regional council to lead this work. So we can see that 78% strongly support or somewhat support the proposal, with 16% in the middle and 6% strongly opposing. So this gives us quite a good guide for what we might be seeing in the consultation. And with some of the comments that people were placing in the responses, we may be able to address concerns that people have who are in the middle. So incorporating feedback where we can through our consultation communications is something we can do to see if we can shift that 16% there. We wanted to know and get some feedback on how the regional council should be engaging. So these were there were a huge raft of ideas, but these are the main ones. So in-person engagement, so that's really good to know. With COVID kind of coming to an end, people do want us to be there in person, but they were also keen for digital options. They wanted us to follow up and be more transparent, and also see that we're taking on feedback that we're asking for from the community. There was a couple of mentions of squeaky wheels in the responses, and people asking that while we talk to the normal group of people who are really engaged in this, we make sure that we're engaging wider, as Jared mentioned, and going wider and reaching different audiences like youth, and making sure we have really strong engagement with mana whenua throughout this process. So the survey is a really good place to start ahead of consultation to get advice from the community about how we're engaging, as well as incorporate some feedback into the consultation communications. So we will be doing that, and we'll also be sharing these results online and through our newsletter database. Kia ora. Are there any questions? I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yeah, great, thank you. Some of the smaller words are a bit hard to read. All of the words, apparently, now, I'm being told.
Sorry.
That's okay. But if it's possible, could you share this with the Joint Committee, this presentation of yours? That'd be great.
Yep.
Thank
It
you.
is on Stella. We put it on first thing this morning.
It is there now?
It is on
Okay,
Stella.
okay. And what about the Joint Committee gets all of that?
Yeah, we can circulate it, not a problem.
Very good. Excellent. Any questions? I've got a couple of questions, but I'll give Anne the floor first.
Thank you, Chair. Rebecca, just wondered with the comments, and I should have probably said it while you were on the slide, the comments around flooding, was there an opportunity for people to say whether that was seawater or groundwater? Because the Cape Coast is reliably low and floods quite regularly. I'm wondering whether they actually thought it was the sea or not. No comments?
I'm just trying to see in my lovely spreadsheet here what it is that people saw. I don't think it was, I will get back to you on that. I think I won't be able to answer the question right now. I'll write that down and come back to you.
That's fine. Thanks, Rebecca. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions, comments? Hannah.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, kia ora, Rebecca. Thank you for your presentation. I saw on your slides that renourishment came up quite a few times, or was quite frequent. Could you give any commentary around the main concern around those renourishment comments that are made in your summary?
So the main concern was that council was wasting money and that it wasn't an effective way of preventing erosion that we saw. That was the main comment that kept coming through.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Good. Any others? Just a comment and a question, a couple of questions. 22 respondents that they actually had losses from either flooding or erosion. I've filled in the survey myself, and when I had to answer that question, I thought very few people would. So I think it's quite important that we actually find out, if we could, what the breakdown is, and I'm possibly with Anne that flooding actually could be due to, as we saw in Wairoa, if we wouldn't have had the mouth opened, we could have seen quite some flooding in build-up area. So, and that has happened in Hamoana as well, and Tiawanga. So I think maybe that's the cause of flooding. So it's not quite in line with erosion and sea level rise, but it's possibly that is the real cause. The other one is hard engineering. If we would ask the question of people who walk their dogs and bike past the limestone revetment walls on Cape View Corner, would they see that as hard engineering? Or would they see that as a soft engineering? Because to me, a concrete wall or sheet metal piling, I call that hard engineering. Personally, myself, I would say it's a natural product. People can walk on it and play on it, and you see driftwood landing on it and so forth. Maybe that's identified as soft engineering. I'm not sure. Maybe we should actually get a bit more vision on that.
That's a really good point, but I think in this case, people were specifying groins, sea walls and rock revetment walls.
Okay. Good. And looking at the pie graph of support, a large area of our coast is managed by HDC, and I must admit, HDC has done a good job to work with community and get some of that engineering in place to give people confidence that actually the work is capable of proceeding, but also they have, I think, trust in those who actually put those revetment walls in place, and sort of having that trust then transferred to someone like Rick and myself, I can see why they would be a bit cagey.
Particularly you, Chair.
So that's just a comment. So I wouldn't read too much into that. We've got half of them, or some of them that actually are not quite sure about it, and I get that, why they would actually think that way. So that's my interpretation of that pie graph. Okay.
In the consultation document, in the question, we are looking at having which council area people are from, so that might give us a good understanding of that in the consultation.
Great. Hayley.
Just a comment from me. I think this process is great. I haven't seen this pre-engagement before a consultation before, and I think it's amazing what you've been able to garner in terms of information with, I'm assuming it was relatively cost effective, before we go out and then put mass comms out, which are really expensive. So just want to say, really value the process, and thank you and well done.
Oh, thanks, Ellie. Yes, this didn't cost anything.
Good. That's another good thing. Rick.
Just on I'm a bit of a cynic on surveys. Let me say that. And I'm a bit of a hard-bitten one of these. The thing I'm just nervous about, where people say they're prepared to pay for more, I've seen this on numerous occasions, and a very famous electoral loss was occurred, where John Major had done survey after survey where the public said they were prepared to pay more for public health. So it was an overwhelming, the results all said that. But when people got to the ballot box, they voted with a checkbook, and he lost hugely. So I just think that on some occasions people will say one thing, but when they get to another circumstance, they say something different. So I'm just putting that there, that I treat these things relatively lightly and very cautiously, that what people say on one day, one circumstance, might not be what they say another day in a different circumstance. So that's my word of caution.
Exactly. When they're asked, the sun was shining, but when they had to actually pay for it, it was actually raining.
Exactly.
So definitely.
Also, this is only 81 people out of the entire Hawke's Bay community. Yeah. So yes, this is just a very, very small proportion. So it does need to be taken with a grain of salt.
Yeah, very lightly. Yeah, it's a good indication, but let's not nail ourselves to the outcome of this. This is kind of where it's at.
That just brought up for me. Thank you, Chair. Supplementary question. Rebecca, was there an option for someone to be able to fill out that form more than once?
No, there wasn't.
It wasn't. No, thank you.
No.
Just checking.
Alana.
We've got voter integrity here.
So through the chair, I did notice in your note that said there were 81 respondents, and there were 49 in one category and 19 in the other category, and by my maths, that's 68.
I saw that too.
And
I knew it was
so-
going to come up. Yes, so I didn't, there was a gap between the 5 and the 10 kilometres between that I hadn't put in. So yes, no, no, you're good. Well done on your maths.
Okay, thank you.
But I think it's important to actually really see where so they weren't all within 1 kilometre of the coast. So they weren't only just coasters filling that out. So they're actually very important. And I've said it before, surveys at times actually give us information, but surveys also work the other way. Depending on how you ask the question, people actually have to read and have to start thinking about what is my position in this space, and therefore they start to think and build a view, and hopefully that will help them actually becoming more engaged and also making wiser decisions. So surveys have got not just one function, which is to give us information, but it also actually gives them information as well, especially if we are wise in the way we ask the question. And I thought this was a good survey. I enjoyed filling it in. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry.
Okay. Anything else to report on your communication and engagement strategy?
No, just the paper as it was, that we had a newsletter go out, that there was a media release out 2 weeks ago with the confirmation of Regional Council going to consultation, and as we'll be discussing the mandatory report and putting a media release out following that being made public.
Good. Excellent. Thank you. Well, if there's no other questions or comments from the floor or from the wall, Hayley. Hayley, would you like to move that we accept this report? Second.
Yeah, happy to move.
Have we got a second? Alwyn, thank you, Alwyn. All those in favour to accept the communications report and update? All in favour say aye.
Right.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Then we go to current coastal projects update. Before you start, Chris, on that, and you call the tech team to give their updates, we've become aware, and after discussions yesterday with Councillor Tanya Kerr, I think I would like to, from now on, if possible, that any of the project updates by tag team and staff, that actually, it only needs to be a bullet point, but actually that actually is an addition to the agenda prior to the meeting. And the reason why we'd like to do that is because when comments are made about certain projects and it's only done verbal, we actually can't actually go back to that information. So we actually like to solidify that somewhat, so we actually can go back and say, yeah, we actually have talked about it, and then actually that was on the table. Councillor Tanya.
Thank you. I would like to absolutely endorse that. What I've noticed is when I've gone to check on something, I don't get it in writing confirmed the 3 months following meeting. So to have those reports, for example, today we've got Whakarere Ave, extended consent for sand at West Shore, Hauana 18 and Whirinaki. Yeah, I think to have a sentence, a paragraph for each of those in the agenda would be hugely beneficial as we go forward, and I endorse your request. And I'm not sure what we need to do to make that happen.
So not a lot. We're happy to take that on board. I think it's a sensible suggestion. As you say, it's not a huge amount of additional work, particularly if it's, you know, a few key points about each project. Staff are preparing that information anyway for their verbal presentation. So assembling it into a simple paper, I think we can do from now on quite easily.
It just need to be a bit prepared a week beforehand to actually put it in paper. And I definitely won't take any credit for the excellent suggestion. Simon, Chris, the floor is yours.
So look, I'll just guide us through, but look, we have Bruce Allen online from Hastings. He might want to take us through the H18. We'll just sort of work backwards. So Bruce.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning all. I guess I'll read out a quick update from Graham Hanson, who's leading the H18 project, and then I'll give a bit more background to it. But effectively, the H18 project has now been added to Hastings District Council's 22-23 annual plan for public consultation, and the proposed rating approach, which at the moment is being suggested as a 15% public, 18% 85% private split. The public good element really relates to the protection of council and public infrastructure that lies in behind the houses in that stretch, with water, stormwater, power, roading, and the like. The proposal for this is still the Westlock wall system that I think Mark and Graham have mentioned to you a number of times before, so that's still in play, and we're promoting it as effectively a two-stage project from a rating perspective, in that stage one is the design and consent process, and that will take some time, and there's a cost associated with that, and there's, I guess, also there's no guarantee. While we do have a track record of making these things happen with the Cape View Corner and Clifton, there is no absolute certainty, so that's the rationale around splitting out the two stages. So stage one, design and consent, we know that'll be upwards of $500,000 and over a period of time. Therefore, the targeted rate that'll be set will be for that portion only, to be recovered and effectively recovered over a 5-year period. If the consent is successful, obviously construction will commence, and that's when the more substantive expenditure will incur, and that recovery of that expenditure, as well as the design and consents, will be amalgamated into a targeted rate for those private beneficiaries, which will be repaid back over a longer period of time. I think just a bit more of an update for your benefit. Obviously, Mark's been giving you progress reports on the H18 through Graham Hansen for a while now, and it was one of those projects where it was been bubbling away, and we never really had certainty of whether we had sufficient support from the property owners in the H18 until just recently, and even then it's not absolute, but there's enough support from those property owners to include it in our annual plan for consultation, and so there's a number of things that we now need to do because of that. One is we need to get more concrete support from those property owners that they are willing to pay the quite substantial targeted rates that flow on from this, given that they are assigned 85% of the cost. We need to obviously consult with the wider community, and that'll flow through the annual plan process, and Hastings District councillors will make that decision in June. As discussed on one of the prior agenda items around the Memorandum of Transition, that quite clearly states that any new interventions or assets that are put on the coast, no matter how they're funded, requires a consultation process with the regional council as well. So there's an undertaking that needs to happen through this time as we work our way through it. So I think that's where we're up to. Like I said, there's been a lot of conversation on this project over a long period of time, and I think it's probably at best 50-50 chance of actually being included in the annual plan for consultation. If we'd missed this opportunity, it would be another year before we could establish a targeted rate mechanism to fund the consenting and design process to work our way through it. So hence sort of the urgency once we manage to get sufficient support from the homeowners and property owners to progress. So I'll leave it there, Mr. Chair, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much for that extensive report. Also, what I would like to do, with the permission of the joint committee members, I've actually the note from Graham Hansen that actually sort of got Councillor Tanya and myself talking about this. I've actually got that in writing, and I would like to actually add that to the minutes for today, so we will approve those going forward. So that's already precedent of what we will see from now on. So thank you very much for that. Have you got any comments or remarks, questions in regards to that report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Kia ora, Bruce. Councillor Haniwai Ormsby here. My question's around with the H18 project. Is there anywhere within your consenting framework where you monitor or capture data around carbon emissions? Is that part of a structure of your consenting process?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not that au fait with that process. Mark might want to step in if he's got anything to add. It's certainly something we can take away and ask Mr. Hanson if that is part of the process, but certainly there'll be lots of additional information required through that consenting process.
Yeah, and through you, Chair, I just asked because it's a consideration, I think, for the regional council when we take on these activities, or if we, and however that looks, is that carbon emissions are going to be something that we'll have to be aware of in terms of whichever activity is endorsed. So yeah, I'm just really conscious that any activity we do, we're capturing that type of data as best as we can. Kia ora.
Just, if I can just follow up with a comment on that. Given that this consenting process potentially under both two councils, the question actually relates to both, and Chris, you might want to comment, but typically those are not things that would be monitored under a consent under the current Resource Management Act. But there's been a couple of cases lately that are throwing some doubt about whether that can or can't be included, but we're about to get a new act, so I think that's the way we're going to head, but it's possibly not something we're able to do if consent was applied for today.
Okay, Rick.
Question to Hastings District Council. Can you describe for me how you intend to undertake the consultation with the regional council?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I'm not 100% sure if that's been fully thrashed out yet, but there's certainly been a letter from our Chief Executive, Mr. Bickle, to the Regional Council's Chief Executive, setting out the intention to consult with the community and with HBRC, and in that letter I'm envisaging that there will be an invitation for a conversation to be had around how that consultation with the Regional Council is undertaken and what needs to happen. So nothing absolute at this stage.
Okay, thank you. Does that satisfy your...
Well, I'm just curious because just where the consultation starts in the process. So what's been described to me now is that the decision's been made to consult, and then the consultation with the Regional Council will be on the basis of how that consultation will be undertaken. It could have started on the process of sending the letter saying, we're thinking about having consultation. What do you think before undertaking it? You with me? There's a chain of decisions here, and I'm just curious as to where Hastings is going to start on those chain of decisions. So I just want you to reflect on that. I would have thought to be completely transparent about it. I'm saying you're not being, but just that once there was an intention to do something, not make the decision, once there was the intention was formed, there'll be a note saying, we are thinking about doing this, what do you think? And then once you get to this point of, well, we've decided to do this, engage on that level. So I'm just trying, I think we're going to have to get these things clearer so there's no misunderstanding. It's just simply what I'm making a point of.
Yeah, and I endorse that remark and question because I think it's a good time now to test Memorandum of Transition and the relationship that we have with one another. So I think it's good, and it's maybe a little bit of a wake-up call for us as partners of how we ought to deal with each other according to the agreement that we've actually got in front of us. So, Tanya, Councillor Tanya.
I support the comments too. I know our management teams have been talking. I know we've been working with the regulatory teams, but actually it's been us as governors that I think have not been speaking. So absolutely acknowledge the comments, and we'll work together closer.
Good. Excellent. Thank you. And I'm conscious of time. I know that Bruce had to leave after an hour, so thank you very much for that report. If you need to leave, then I think we've all asked questions. Or Alan, did you have your hand up?
I was going to say I support the comment too, but I would note that there has been a meeting at District Council maybe 18 months ago. I think you were there.
Yes.
James Palmer was there. Rex was there, where this was all discussed and brought up as an intention and a way forward. And there seemed to be agreement around the table at the time. I know it's not formal, but it has been signalled.
Yeah, exactly. Let's be super careful here. I say that because, to be perfectly frank, as you're probably aware, not everybody in the Regional Council is entirely happy with this. So making sure that there are no grounds for people to sort of say, oh, we've been ambushed here.
Yeah.
And that we were amongst friends, but now we're actually going to firm up on some of the reporting that we're doing. Let's put it that way.
I accept that.
Okay, good enough. Excellent. Any other comments or questions for Bruce? If not, once again, thank you very much. And there was no, Whirinaki, there was no report on that, I understand. So
we do have, I think, Deborah Stewart online. There we go.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Chair. I did give a very brief written update on the Whakarari Ave project yesterday. As you'll be aware, we were unable to award that tender initially. So that is back with our design and projects team, just having a review, and we'll be looking to re-tender. So that project is absolutely still on the books, and we've just got a few work-ons there to get it over the line.
Excellent, thank you.
So the next one was the extended consent area for sand deposition. So we've been working through that with Napier. So that was a co-funded consent to extend the existing consented area. Look, we have put that on pause, and the reason is the complexity, cost and time for gaining that consent is really blowing out. And we were very much looking at our priorities. And so we're also looking at what our strategy is around the existing West Shore beach. So the direction of travel that we'd like to take there is to focus on our strategy around the West Shore beach. Renourishment, is that the right strategy to take us forward? Our consent there runs out in 5 years. So 5 years sounds like a long time, but in the world of consenting, and particularly, consents that require a lot of technical information and a lot of consultation, had a wide range of views, can often take quite a long time. So we think that's the priority to start, and we can come back with a bit more detail. It's really, what is the extent we should be protecting? What is the line we should be protecting? Is the renourishment program, which was commenced in the mid-80s, still the right way to go? And explore those sorts of questions and ensure we have a consent in place for when our consent runs out in 5 years' time. So that's our plan around that. So happy to answer any questions or comments.
Questions or comments from the wall or here from the table? Yeah, anyway.
Thanks, Chair, through you. Chris, just with the extended consent area situation, you said there's 5 more years till that consent is complete.
So the sand consent actually is longer. So the existing placement zone for sand, I think, expires in around 10 years' time.
Okay.
Whereas the West Shore placement of shingle on the beach expires in about 5 years' time.
Okay. So within those consents, are there opportunities to be able to exit those consents earlier than those timeframes?
Yes, so the consent doesn't require us to do the activity. It gives us permission to do the activity.
Okay.
There's some consents require you to do things if the activity is undertaken, but so I haven't got the consent in front of me, but look, and the review will take some time because it's quite technical, there's a lot of analysis. If the review suggests that in fact there's a better way to manage that location, which is consistent with the pathways and consistent with the decisions of the Regional Council going forward, then there'll be an opportunity to make decisions around that. We won't necessarily say we have to continue on a certain pathway because that's what is consented, but it may be that any different pathway will also require a consent. So what we're doing is trying to give ourselves plenty of time to respond, rather than having consents run out and no pathway really going forward beyond that. So we won't keep doing it if it's not the best option, but there'll be a whole bunch of decisions and permissions required for any alternate activity.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No one on the wall? Okay. On that note then, I would like a mover and a seconder that we accept the recommendation that the Clifton Tangoio Coastal Hazard Strategy Joint Committee receive the current coastal projects update that we've just heard.
With the amendment that you put.
With the amendment that I've put in place. Okay, and Alan, was that a comment or actually that you seconded it? I
seconded it.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, excellent. On that note, all in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried. Okay, and then we go to minor items, which there are none. So therefore we come to the end of the meeting. Once again, as Chris has said, and I think we all understand, we're at a very important part of coastal hazards, and we're looking forward to the next 2 years, 2024, to actually get this firmed up and the work to start. So consultation will be very important with public, and hopefully that will be a worthwhile exercise, and to also as part of educate the public of what we're actually trying to do with this particular strategy, which is so important for our community and for our coast. Okay, on that note, Alana, would you like to close in karakia, please?
Okay. Aye. Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te atawai o tō tātou āraki a ihu karaiti, me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga ki te wairua tapu, ake, amene.
Amene. Thank you very much appreciated. Good. Thank you all for attending, much appreciated. And now we'll go into workshop.
Yep.
Aroha mai,